Welcome to Going Deeper with David Steele, the show that dives into the heart of environmental solutions while literally floating on the source, the ocean. In just a few short minutes, we'll meet with the entrepreneurs and game changers that are making a difference in people's lives through the products and services they provide. Get ready to unplug from the matrix of mediocrity and plug into nature as we discuss the solutions to many of today's biggest challenges. It's time to go deeper. I'm so stoked to be out here in the water with my dear friend, Stacey Murphy. We are in Laguna Beach today for several reasons. One is it's absolutely beautiful here. It's usually always very calm and glassy. I'm sure we will see some mammals today, likely dolphins. And I'm really excited for this week's episode of Going Deeper. And we are going to talk about Dreaming Earth Ventures, which is Stacey's master plan. And I'm always so excited when I meet people that have a vision that's so big that, it takes me a minute to just go, oh my gosh, are you really up to that? And what we wanted to talk about today was regenerative buildings. Like, can you imagine a future where our buildings and structures that we live in coming from natural resources that are actually helping to remove carbon from the air rather than add it and have the ability to heal themselves? Now, I know that probably sounds incredulous because it did when she first told me, but she's actually doing it. It's pretty amazing. I've been involved in green buildings and in environmental causes for so long, and I'm always so happy to meet the heroes that are out there dreaming of things that are going to make life better for our children. First, I think you probably need to do a little intro into what you're up to for us laymen's. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the generous invitation to come out here and enjoy this beautiful water with you, and the generous introduction. Thank you so much. And think about it this way. How many times have you sat in meditation and you pictured yourself somewhere else? Oftentimes, if you're in a city, you've pictured yourself sitting out here in the water or sitting in a tree house or meditating somewhere that feels better, that feels more like nature. And so what if our buildings felt more like that, like they were actually living, breathing entities, and that when you're inside of them, it felt like this out here, right? When I was a little kid, I always imagined that we would be living in buildings that grow themselves. And
say that again?
Buildings that grow themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. And I know oftentimes we think kids are like, oh, kids, they're so idealistic. They don't know. When they get older, they'll see the way the world works. But as I got older, I recognized that this is more and more possible today. So my background is engineering and architecture. I left both because they just weren't moving fast enough, I thought, on the sustainability front. So in 2009, started a think tank and started my first business of regenerative agriculture business. It was a decentralized urban farming network, which just is a fancy way to say that instead of the big centralized food system, we were repurposing all the waste of the city, the spaces, farmers' resources, all the waste from the food industry, repurposing it into food. And everybody was a part of it. It was tens of thousands of people who were part of this open source network. And what it taught me was how efficient nature is when it's truly exchanging gifts on that decentralized level. Mm-hmm. And regenerative agriculture is very much about restoring soils, building up microbiome in the soil. More leaf in the soil means more carbon sequestered, means better water infiltration, so we don't have erosion. All these benefits, right? So you start to see these complex systems. And so then I started, when I sold my regenerative agriculture businesses, I started looking around and I saw that people were ready.
That's incredible. They do some regenerative agriculture in Costa Rica. When I was visiting some of the communities there, in particular, Stephen Brooks has done a lot in that space, where, we live in this world where we all think we have to do all things. but in a community, one person can be the farmer and one person can be doing something else. And it just makes so much more sense to share the limited resources that we have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so then I started thinking about what does that look like in terms of architecture? So I come from the architecture world. We have a mammal coming up on our left over here on a stand-up paddleboard. I grew up in the architecture world, and what I quickly realized is that when you're in architecture school, you're designing these amazing things. And you're imaginative. You have all your skills going. You're like, what if this? What if that? You're designing new futures all the time. And then you get out into the architecture world, and you're not used for those skills that you were taught. You actually are a service provider, and you get assigned to a building, usually, and you have a budget and a timeline, which means you have to pick from whatever is available that day to build. And I think we can all agree that the system that we have today isn't quite working the way we would hope in terms of...
Not fast enough.
Right? Right? And so innovation is just being slowed down. There's all these creative people. So what if we had a decentralized open source membership network where architects come in, designers, investors, scientists, biologists, all the people that are necessary to grow buildings?
Is that what you're creating? Amazing. Amazing. I think it just, in so many ways, we have all the little pieces, I mean, I had an LED lighting company early on. So I'm like, this is the direction. I go into LEDs. That was 2000, 20 years ago. They were so expensive. And now it's like there's so many more products between 3D printing and actually being able to, can't you grow certain products like hemp to access structure for building?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I know this moment is so ripe, because AI, robotics, 3D printing, sensors, these are going to transform the architectural industry either way. But if we can use it in a more regenerative way, we can just exponentially change things. So there is a company called E3 who's creating a lot of hemp products. And one of them is hemp rebar. And the idea is to replace steel rebar. So they're growing a mile a day. They're braiding it. They're covering it in a resin that's like cashew, sunflower, hemp-based. And then, so it's all regenerative. It's helping to restore soil. It's helping the biology of the local area. And then when you put it into an architectural product, steel is one of the biggest contributors to carbon emissions. And so if we could replace some of that with other products.
The concrete's right behind it.
Right? And the other thing about steel is corrosion. So we replace our roads so often because of corrosion, but that's because the steel is in there corroding. And then thermal bridging. If you have a building and you have an interior and exterior, if the rebar goes from the interior to the exterior inside the concrete, it's a thermal bridge. So you could have an energy savings by keeping the buildings cooler with using the hemp rebar as well. So you've got triple benefits just in the architectural line. And then you got the regeneration of the soil.
Incredible. And so, where are you at along the way? I mean, can people begin to see what you're up to and join it?
Yeah, so we're early stage ourselves. So I've been incubating people in a process that I call an Earth Quest, which is very much like a vision quest, like indigenous people used to send people on vision quests. So this is kind of the business incubation process for regenerative materials. And so I've been incubating startups so people can join the community, and we have weekly meetings. There is also the possibility to join an EarthQuest. If you have a product that you want incubated and you want to be put in front of investors, we also have that process as well.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the way that I see it is this is essentially becoming a decentralized venture capital fund. So the idea is that architecture firms, construction firms, they all need to meet mandates. They don't know how they're going to meet the zero carbon mandates for 2030. And soon there's going to be water mandates, because I just heard in Arizona that they're halting a lot of development because they don't have the water to provide to people, so they can't develop any more land, right? So the mandates for everything, energy, water, all of our resources are going to get stricter and stricter. And so those architecture firms, construction firms, developers, we're all in this together. So they become limited partners in the fund and they benefit from any products that are created. Or if they want to be a part of the network, the professional network, they can also join there as a member. And what that provides is they get training in regenerative design for their team. And then if their team, it's kind of like skunkworks. Like if you're a company, oftentimes innovation comes from outside your company. So the same way that, Blockbuster gets disrupted by Netflix, Icon came along and disrupted a lot of things. Their 3D printing architecture, they're disrupting a lot of things, right? So it usually comes from outside of the industry. So why can't we get together and actually do the innovation ourselves, since we know the industry really well?
Do you wake up some days and say, this project's bigger than me? What am I doing?
Oh my gosh, every day. It's way bigger than me. It's way bigger than me. More people I tell about it, they love the idea when they feel into living inside those buildings and living inside those buildings, what it would feel like to live inside of a live.
Have you seen any examples that are starting to get close by using components of this?
So the closest I've seen so far to actually living, so let's get to that. If we were truly living in a regenerative building, it would actually be able to self-heal itself, right? So let's say a hailstorm came and put dents in the outside of the building. The material would actually regrow itself. Or let's say it's an interior and it's getting a lot of use. Maybe the materials would rebuild themselves so that the durability of the materials wouldn't necessarily be the same as it is today. They wouldn't wear.
So is this years and decades from now, or is it like how far?
So I would say 2030 will be there, where buildings can actually, the shells will actually be able to regenerate.
That's not that far away.
I know, crazy. MIT, they are creating a 3D printed platform. They will infuse a zinnia cell, and a zinnia is a beautiful flower, if you're unfamiliar. It's one of the fastest growing cell networks. And so they infuse this lattice work with a single zinnia cell, and then it fills in the structure and keeps regenerating. I like to think about it like this. Do you know axolotl? I'm sure you know axolotl, right?
Yep. I don't think so.
Okay, so it's a little creature. It looks like a little salamander.
Okay.
And if you cut off its arm, we know stories about, you cut off a tail of a lizard and it grows back. But an axolotl, when you cut off an arm, you're cutting off bone, tissue, everything, skin. It will regrow everything in 40 days, the bone included. And so nature is already doing this. All we're really doing is getting closer and closer to how nature really works. And quantum mechanics is going to be a big part. Most people don't realize photosynthesis is the number one energy exchange system from one source of energy to another, 97%. Humans haven't even gotten anywhere close to that. We're at like 60% or something. The reason photosynthesis is so efficient is quantum tunneling. And so that's we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But we're starting to understand more quantum mechanics, which I think is going to help us understand those layers of why can't we get closer to 97% efficiency in our energy? Why can't we regenerate an arm?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing the advances in solar because, current solar panels are in the 20 percentile, 20-something percent efficient, and there's just a long way to go.
Yeah. And even in solar panel, I've been hearing talk, I haven't looked into it, of like biosolar, where a lot more algae and a lot more...
That would be interesting. Kind of just getting back to it. Right now, it's kind of a vision, and you're kind of starting to put together the teams and the funding and the different things that are needed. We'll share in the notes where you could go and, sign up and become a member and look at it. But I wanted to say, let's list some of the things that a smart building, regardless of the regenerative nature of the building itself, but some of the other components it could have, for example, like, much more natural lighting, much more, whatever.
Yeah. And I think
what are some of the other things?
Yeah. And I think that's been really maximized in the architectural industry, I would say. If you have a good designer, they're looking at, right now they're doing parametric modeling, AI modeling, to make sure that everything has light, Everything has natural light, natural air, passive cooling, all these things. And people are working in that direction. But I think there's even more that people are unaware of beyond that even, which is speccing demolition. I think is going to be the first stage in all this. Because if we can't decompose our buildings, then why are we building, right? Because everything ends. Everything comes to an end. And so if we're not speccing how this building comes apart and how the pieces are recycled, then we don't know anything about what we're doing. So, and just to give one taste of that is there's a business called Urban Machine, and they looked at lumber and said, well, the whole reason we're not repurposing wood is because we can't get the metal fasteners out of the wood after demolition, and so the wood can be reused. So they set up 3 robots. First robot basically senses all the metal on the exterior, chops it off, so that now the metal's all on the inside. Second robot basically heats up that metal to wood bond, breaks it. Third robot pulls it out. So now you've got a simple solution, and now that lumber can be repurposed. So somebody in the architecture world, developer world, in the contractor world, they could spec the demolition of all of their wood and say, this is what's going to happen on demolition. And that goes a long way because that building in 10, 20, whatever the time frame is, it will come down.
Yeah. And I think that we're still kind of coming to grips with how we can effectively reuse the components. Living in San Diego, I think, every other car is an electric vehicle. So we're talking just San Diego alone, not the U.S. We're talking about hundreds of tons of batteries that are going to need to be repurposed, reused, something in the next 10 to 20 years. It's really interesting and super helpful if we move to a point of, not what the cost is to purchase this item is, but what's the cost of item in its life cycle.
Yeah.
And how can we associate that to it so that, we have a mechanism that happens, when it's end of life. I look at all the batteries and I'm like, they could be repurposed in Mexico and other places to, maybe it's not going to drive your Model X 300 miles anymore, but it sure is going to light your house for a long time.
Exactly. If you think about it, this is architecture. It's a $17 trillion industry. It's ripe for so much disruption on every front. So there is economic models here that we're still discovering and how this can benefit a lot of people by creating new traffic. Yeah.
Well, I think it's incredibly exciting. I absolutely know we're going to do more episodes as we get closer and start to see some of this vision come to life. And, I think that the thing that makes me happy is that I keep meeting people that are doing things that are going to make the planet better. The main word of this year is seemingly regeneration, and what Stacey's talking about here is how can we create environments that are regenerative? I mean, what an incredible idea and vision. And I won't ask you your why because you kind of stated it in the very beginning. But I just love how broad and what a deep thinker you are. It's not like you're just dreaming this stuff up. You actually studied architecture and studied all of these things as an engineer as well. So yeah, let's make it happen. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody, and please check out this episode. We will include, what's the new website going to be?
Dreaming.ventures.
Dreaming.ventures. Yeah, I look forward to sharing more about this in the future. And come and check it out at Going Deeper with David Steele. I will see you all next week. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Going Deeper with David Steele. I hope you found inspiration and insight to fuel your passion for a better world. Remember, change starts with us, and together we can be the driving force for a brighter, more sustainable future. So until next week, keep your hearts open, your minds curious, and your actions aligned with the planet's well-being. Stay committed, stay conscious, and let's meet right back here next time for another deep dive into making a difference.